welcome. You are tuned in and listening to Sharona Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sharona. Thanks for tuning in. You guys, big happy Monday, by the way. Big show today. I'm so excited to bring you to women that I greatly respect and admire for the work that they are doing. Michelle Jinks is going to join me in the first part of the show. Michelle is I say that she's a writer. Michelle sat down with me last night. We did a pre-record because, like a lot of women, she has a day job. She also writes and covers sports as well. So she stays on her grind. We sat down last night and recorded this segment. I'm very excited to bring it to you. We talked about the writing process. We talked about what it means to be a writer now, especially when we talk about sports media, which has undergone some rather dramatic changes over the past several years. You'll get to hear us talk about that. And then in the last segment, in the last part of the show, I hope I don't go all fangirl on her, but I'm so excited to have Latoya Peterson, who writes for Racialicious and for Fusion.net. We're going to talk about. I had so many things I wanted to talk to her about, but it's been National Poetry Month. It's ending in a few days. I wanted to talk to her about some of her articles that she's posted, where she's highlighted interpretive poetry. Poetry was a big passion of mine growing up. It was a way for me to record my thoughts, to express emotion. And so I'm very excited to talk to her. We're going to talk about a number of topics, including a very interesting article that she posted and wrote about comedians talking about how they're terrified of Twitter. There's been a lot of controversy lately among comedians and with comedians. You guys know that I talked about Trevor Noah early on in this show a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about that. The latest Adam Sandler controversy. So a lot of great topics coming up for us to talk about. Again, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and get you set up with Michelle, and then hopefully we'll be able to talk with Latoya, like I said in that last segment. And happy Monday. Very excited. Thanks again for tuning in.
All right, good morning and welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Sharona Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sharona. As we mentioned in the introduction, big show today. This is being, as you heard in the introduction, this is being recorded. We're actually recording this on Sunday evening because my girl Michelle, the Sports Jinx, is like a lot of women out there. She's on her grind. She's got a day job in addition to what she's going to be doing, what she does, and what she's going to be doing with the Sports Jinx. I had originally intended for this kind of to be a writer's show, but she informed me. I beg to disagree with her. We're going to have this discussion here in a minute. She informed me she did not consider herself to be a writer. Again, I beg to disagree with that. But, Michelle, let me go ahead and bring you on in here. Thank you again so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Sharona. I'm so happy to be here. And no, I don't consider myself to be a writer.
But you're right. You do. You're right. We're going to get to that in a minute. Before we get there, I want you to tell everybody, Michelle Jinks, obviously I've introduced you, but who is Michelle Jinks and what is the Sports Jinx?
Well, the Sports Jinx hasn't quite gotten off the ground, with the exception of maybe my Twitter name and now a Facebook page. But what the Sports Jinx is hoping to be is sort of like a sports show. Just my own sports show. I like sports. I like talking about everything. I worked in sports, and I worked with a lot of different sports. So, yes, football is my passion, and I love football, but, I like to talk about tennis and maybe a little basketball, sometimes baseball. Just depends on what's going on in the world. I might see a kickball game that I want to discuss and maybe bring that into it, but something like that with a little touch of entertainment, because that's just what I like to do. I like to talk. It'll be a few stories in there. I have some other people helping write some stories of things that they're passionate about. But for the most part, mine, I like to keep it funny, and I like to keep it a little engaging, but just a tad bit comedy inside if you get the humor.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you talk. I'm not so sure that we're not in a new. Actually going to be talking to. I'm very excited about this show, by the way, as you heard in the introduction. Michelle, I love Michelle. Michelle's one of my. Michelle and I share a lot of interest when it comes to sports. I too like all kinds of sports. I'll watch a tennis game. I'll watch all kinds of different sports. But we're going to be talking to Latoya Peterson, who's a writer. She writes for Fuse. She is multi-talented. I'm so excited to talk to her in the last part of the show. But and one of the things that we'll be talking about is the infusion, or the perhaps a better word might be the interaction now. I think that we've been seeing a shift and an evolution in media and reporting, and we've always had, there's been print media and then the televised media, which have kind of occupied two separate areas. But now with the era of social media and with different ways to communicate with an audience, I think we're really starting to see more of a blending of writing and visual aids. So I don't know, maybe 20 years from now, nobody will be saying that they're a quote unquote writer. I don't know what terminology. We'll have to think of a word, Michelle. What word can we use to talk about someone who writes, maybe doesn't consider themselves a writer by trade, but in media and the profession now, you're writing, plus you're also producing either audio or visual content.
I know. Like you mentioned, everything's changing so much. Who knows what? Seriously, are we really? I'm thinking about in years to come, will we really have people on TV talking? Or will it just be a bunch of, robots? Or will soon ESPN will just have a Twitter feed going down the side and then let everybody send in tweets instead of people on TV reporting? But I don't know. It's moving so fast. Everything is moving so fast, but it's giving a lot of people an opportunity. And again, that's a problem as well as a blessing. More people talking, more things going on. You have more controversy because now everybody's opinions are out there. That's basically what we get in today's sports world, where everything becomes a big issue. Why? Because we have so many different personalities and so many different opinions about everything. Where before we see a story and the 2 or 3 people who we see on TV all the time, those were the only opinions we hear. Now it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, different people for every couple of hours.
Yeah, it's definitely a new era, and I want to come up with the word. I want to get credit for the word, so I'm going to be working on that. That's my next project. I want credit for the word. What word should we use? Writer, produce, web content.
Web content is out there. Social media person, all of those. I think those things are there.
Yeah, media for no, I don't like that one. Well, I could come up with a good one, but it's definitely interesting that we're starting to see that even more and more that blend with video or audio being inserted, being incorporated is a better word, incorporated into what we do anymore. Our perception, our concept of what writing and what what it means to be a reporter. They're undergoing very radical changes right now. But did you write at all growing up?
Well, let's just say this. I was a journalism major in college, and not because I wanted to write, but because I saw Jane Kennedy on the NBC sports show, the CBS sports show, doing football in the studio with Irv Cross and the guys, and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. That's so cool. And then, of course, Robin Roberts joined ESPN, and I absolutely knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I thought, okay, what do I do? How do I get into that profession? So I chose journalism as a major. And then, of course, when I got there, my professors informed me that sports wasn't real journalism and that I had to do newspaper writing. And so we weren't allowed to do any sports in journalism class. And the only time we could do sports was on our own, like if we wanted to do that different. But for class, no, we had to do legit newspaper writing and things like that. And that wasn't my thing. I just wanted to talk about sports.
Yeah.
But didn't really know everything involved. It was a lot more harder than I thought. But
Yeah, writing is hard work. It definitely is hard work. Where did you go to school?
I went to Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida.
The beautiful state of Florida. That's pretty interesting. We're going to have to do a show where we just talk about the college experience and some of something like that. I shared one of my college experiences on the show Wednesday. Claire Mullins was my guest co-host last Wednesday. Michelle, I know you know her from NFL Female.
Absolutely.
So did you read a lot growing up?
I read a lot. I read some. I now don't get me wrong. English was my favorite subject in school. I mean, I absolutely adored it. I hated math and science.
Michelle, let me interrupt you just real quick to tell you something. You're a great writer. You may not appreciate it, but you are a good writer. I can tell that. That's why when I was planning for this, I was like, oh, I'll talk about writing because you're good at it. You really are good at it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I absolutely hate. I don't think so, and it is fine though. I'm glad that people do enjoy it. I probably can put a little more work into it and probably get a little better. But I enjoy writing for NFL Female. Let's just put it that way. It's not my favorite thing, but this is helping me a little bit because I enjoy doing those articles. You guys, I mean, some people don't know, but, I always try to keep it very humorous, especially when I'm doing the picks for the week. It's usually always something funny in there. Sometimes people don't get it, but I'm always joking in most of those articles. But
I think they're very well done. They're very well done, and I've gotten quite a bit of chuckles out of it. And so, what kind of, you said that you did read, what did you read when you were growing up? Did you have a favorite author?
When we were it's so funny because, don't ask me why I remember this, but when we were in, I believe it was 5th grade, and my teacher, we had to read all of the, let me see, what is the books that you read when you're a kid? It's a female writer. We had to read all of the, I can't even think, see, now I can't remember. I'll remember when we get off there.
Like Charlotte Web?
Well, not that, but that is one of my favorite movies. I like the movie, but no, I can't think of.
Like Jane Austen?
It wasn't Jane Austen. No, I can see the little boy because it was a little kid. He was a bad little kid too, but I can't remember. But anyway, we used to read all of those little books, and that kind of started me reading. I bought a lot of magazines. I would read some books. In college, I took a lot of African American novel classes. So my favorite author, actually the favorite author that I had passed away, which was B.B. Moore Campbell.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I absolutely love every book. There's not a book that she's written that I didn't like. And I actually was in a book club for the last 12 years. The book club just kind of went by the wayside maybe the last 2 years, but for 10 years, 12 years, was in a book club, and we had to read a book every month, so that was great. But B.B. Moore Campbell was one of my favorite authors. Absolutely loved her book, and quite ironically, what is the guy's name? I forget the guy's name, but this guy, he just passed away too. It's funny that the people who I enjoyed passed away, but he wrote books. Actually, these books were like homosexual in nature. So it's not a book that I thought I would enjoy, but absolutely Lynn Harris. And the first time I heard all of these people kept talking about this book, and it was 2 books. It was like 2 of them came behind each other, and I was like, I don't know if I want to read that book. But when you read the book, the way the guy wrote the book, you forget that these guys were homosexual. You just would start envisioning them, and I'm like, oh, they look so good. I wonder who could play them in a movie. So every guy we would see walking by, he's like, oh, yeah, he can be so-and-so. But he wrote so well. His writing was so well that you can see everything, and it made you passionate about the character, the subject. And I even got my mom to read them, and she enjoyed it. So
wow,
that's
interesting.
But B.B. Moore Campbell would be my favorite author, and of course, I would love her.
Is there a particular genre that you enjoy the most, or do you like to dabble around in different things? And do you read Toni Morrison, who I love?
Toni Morrison, I've read her books, but her books are so difficult. God, Lord. Yeah, I've read it because, again, in my book club for 12 years, we read books by African Americans, novels, novels. But we did venture out, and we read some different books because on our own, we would read other stuff. And so because on your own, you're reading all kind of self-help books and things like that, you're reading different stuff. So we tried to focus on stuff that normally we may not read all the time. And so we actually found some interesting books. But, yeah, Toni Morrison, we've read a couple of hers as well, and I swear those books are so difficult. Now, one of my favorites that we read that hardly anyone read because the book was like 900 pages was The Emperor of Ocean Park, Stephen L. Carter. And when I say it was such a great book, it was such a great book, but the book was so long that it intimidated most of the book club. But
they can be. Long books like that can be.
Yeah, but it was such a great book. It started so slowly. It started very slowly, and so you were like, oh, this is not going to be good. But I'm one of those people. I'm willing to give it a try. I'll keep going and see if it's going to get me. And surely enough, it did. It's almost like the game. The book was like a game of chess. And he kind of wrote the book like that. Now, I don't understand. I don't even know how to play chess, but boy, was it a good book. It was great.
That's interesting. When you were growing up, did you keep a journal or anything like that?
I never kept a journal. Never kept a journal. And you would think I would because I was one of those kids. Believe it or not, I was a kid that didn't talk a lot at home. And I was kind of quiet around the house. Notice I said around the house because I talked all the time at school.
Yeah, that surprised me. I would have pictured you as being one of the more talkative kids. And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 3 brothers. I had 3. One of my brothers passed. 3 brothers and 1 sister. And I am the second to the youngest.
And you were the quietest. See, I find that hard to believe.
No, I wasn't the quietest. I was quiet compared to what people see now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, we've sort of been talking about it a little bit. We're going to move into sports media. We've been talking about the evolution of sports writing. You sort of touched upon it when you were talking about the book club. The 900, 1,000-page novel it's frightening because we live in such a harried, hectic world And you're starting to see that in in sports writing. That I often say that we're seeing the death of the long form. You still see some really good long form writing out there. You see some guys writing about sports who think they're writing long form pieces, but they're just filling words on a page. But I really enjoy the longer, more in-depth articles, dealing with whatever it is, in sports. But we don't see that nearly as often as we used to.
No, you don't. Again, and I think a lot of that has to do with social media and just television. Because we're such a visual world now that people don't want to take the time to read. They always say if you want to hide anything from Americans, you put it in writing.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, we're such a visual world now where it's funny because the young lady who actually started me on Twitter and now has the Facebook and keeps pushing this sports Jinks, she always said, well, you got to start putting videos up in videos. And I'm like, I don't have time. I don't want to watch everybody's videos. I'm the eyeball. I really don't want to see everything. I just want to read some of the articles. Yeah, but I'm like that. But I'm one of the minority. Most people just rather look at the video or look at the picture and read a little caption. They don't want to.
See, this is why we're soul sisters. I'm just like you. I want to read it. I go through. I have a love-hate relationship with a lot of talk radio, especially sports talk radio. My interest kind of waxes and wanes depending on how misogynistic it is at any particular time. But it's been in the past, and we've talked about this here. It's been so misogynistic that it's turned me off. I do enjoy great sports writing. Is there a website out there that's kind of like your go-to to find good writing or to keep yourself informed or updated?
I try to venture to all of them. I follow a lot of people on Twitter who send articles or writings, and then I'm one of those people who click on the link so I can read the article before I make a comment so I can see what's going on. But I tend to go, of course, you're going to go to ESPN.com, which I don't care for too much, and then I'll go to Sports Illustrated because I find more writing on there. I'll go to their site as well. I go to USA Today. I like to go to the New York Times. I like to go to the Washington Post. I mean, those are usually the places where I would go to read.
Yeah, those are all usually the big heavy hitters there. Are you trying out any of the, I hate to call them news, some of them have been around for a while, but there's some good content being done at Vice Sports, at SB Nation. Full disclosure, I have written for SB Nation and hope to continue to write for SB Nation in the future. Do you try out those websites? And have you tried?
I do. I do.
What about the Players Tribune?
I go to SB Nation because those people, and I found out those are people that I follow on Twitter. So I found all of those from Twitter, and a lot of times I'm going to read the articles. So that they're great for me. I mean, I'll go anywhere. I'll go a lot of different places to read art. What's funny is that sometimes, all the time, usually when I write my articles after a game, I usually will write my article right after the game. And then I'll go, like, later on after I send it, I'll go and read articles about my team, my game later. And it's always good because if I see some stuff that, maybe the same kind of subject or maybe the same thing that I pointed out, they may have pointed out as well, then I'm like, okay, I'm on the same. I'm there. We're on the same page. So
I like to go to a lot of different sites too, and I think that being a good consumer makes you a good writer because you're maybe it's the process of osmosis. I don't know, but I find that if I, after reading really good work, that it inspires my own work and makes my own work better.
Right. It's sort of like I read a lot of different ones afterwards, because it's sort of like that's how I'm grading my own work. That's how I go back to grade my work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll write my article, I'll send it, then I'll go back and read like 5 different post-game articles on, just to see. I just want to see.
Yeah. Not only... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done. I was done.
Okay. Yeah, I like reading different... I don't always agree with what I'm reading, but I like to read those divergent and various perspectives, because there's nothing better than having someone challenge you intellectually. For me, that's something that I enjoy.
Absolutely. Those were always, all of my hardest professors in college were my favorites. The ones that absolutely drove me nuts, that gave you too much work and act like they was the only class you had, those were all my favorite professors. Because I know that I can do halfway and pass and just do just enough, but they always push me to do more, and sometimes I just need that someone to push me to do more. And that's what those professors did. Every last one of them, it was like that was the only class we had. And one guy we had, Professor Kierstead, I'll never forget him. He worked for CBS. And he would give us so much to do. I'm like, one day I was like, you realize we do have other classes, right? And he just laughed.
Yeah. Some people prefer to be, high pressure, under pressure like that, and some people don't perform all that well. But I always did. Give me a challenge, give me a something to challenge me, and I at least like to think or hope that that I rise up to that challenge. But it is you raise a good point, and it's a really great way to kind of segue into the next topic that we want to talk about. Not only is media and the way we consume not just sports media, but we're talking primarily about sports media because that's what Michelle and I do. But in what it means to be a sports journalist or a sports media personality or a sports writer, whatever terminology you want to apply to what it is that we actually do these days, and that is that there's a lot of competition. There's always been a lot of competition. I think that there's far more competition now than there ever has been. But we're also under greater scrutiny than in the past because of social media and because of cell phones and cameras and things of that nature. And we've talked a lot here on this show. I shouldn't say a lot. We've discussed what happened with Britt McHenry and her suspension from ESPN, and I raised the question the first time that we mentioned this. I raised the question, whether or not a male in a similar situation would get the same kind of suspension or what have you. I don't know. We have seen ESPN. We're going to talk about Stephen A. Smith here in a minute. He's been suspended for some of the things that he said. Keith Olbermann was suspended for his role in a very public and very ugly, quite frankly, Twitter spat with Penn State students who's been very critical of Penn State and how they handled Joe Paterno and the situation up there. But still, somebody, I know what it was, Friday, on our show Friday, Game Over with Eleven of Sharona, we had Melissa Jacobs on. She's so great. It was such a great interview with her. she said that there were people that were questioning whether Britt McHenry would be able to, to continue to do her job in light of the situation, and that really bothers me. I don't see any reason why she can't continue to do her job. Do you, Michelle?
Now, I'm not that familiar with the story, so you got to give me a little background. Again, I've been away from the news for a while with my schedule.
Okay. Well, Britt McHenry is a reporter for ESPN, and she is petite, she's blonde, she's pretty. She's the petite blonde, blue-eyed cheerleader type. And she was caught. This happened about a week ago Friday. It didn't happen then, but this is when it came out. I think it just happened the night before. So very contemporaneously with the report. So a video came out showing her car had been towed, and I believe this was Baltimore. Don't hold me to that, but she was somewhere. She had parked her car, and the car had been towed, and when she went to pick it up, she acted quite ugly and very much. She hit every single mean girl stereotype there was. It was pretty amazing. And she, once it came out, and there's the outrage and the backlash, and she was suspended for a week from ESPN because of it. Somebody had mentioned that they'd lost respect for her. Yeah, listen, maybe you did lose respect for her, but if you're going to treat her differently, I have a real problem with someone saying that they would treat her differently or as any less than a professional, because, let's face it, there are some male reporters out there, male reporters who work for ESPN who are huge assholes. And, they still report, they still do their job. I would have a real problem with anybody treating her. And then look at Bill Belichick, and I love him, but Pop, the coach of the San Antonio Popovich.
Awesome.
Yeah, come on now. There's a real double standard when it comes to women in the media and reporting, and it's offensive to me.
I also think that it's a double standard for when you see things on video. Mm-hmm. And when we see things on video, we react. And the suspensions and whatever else comes with that, the penalties, comes because we saw it on video.
Yeah.
But if she would have just got arrested and we just would have read about it, then it wouldn't have been it would have been a different story. But when people see things, then everybody reacts. Everybody is human. And we can go on a lot of jobs and see people at work and see them one way and then see them away from work and like, what in that? And say, what in that? What a butthole. So, I wouldn't treat her any differently when she's doing her job. Now, when she's not doing her job, she may not be a nice person. But that's a lot of reporters. I've been around reporters for most of my adult life. And they're not always the nicest people. So... Especially the bigger they are, the worse they are,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it raises a really good question. I'm going, as you guys may or may not know, I guess this is an opportunity maybe for me to officially announce it. There will not be a show next Wednesday. Sharona is going to be in Chicago covering the NFL draft. But when I come back, we are going to resume with our schedule a week from today, a week from Monday, a great show. Robin Monday is going to join me for that show. And then on Wednesday, Owen Good is going to join me, and that show is going to be devoted to gaming. I'm really excited about Wednesday's show. But after that, we're going to devote a show to what role media occupy, particularly in sports media. I'm going to limit it to sports media because I do feel like it's a little bit different in sports media than it is in media overall. What role do women occupy? What role should they occupy? Excuse me. What role should they occupy? And with that, that's a great way for us to segue into our next topic, which is two-part. Men still don't care about women being abused, and what role do and should women occupy in the media? And it revolves around Stephen A. Smith, notorious domestic abuser apologist. Stephen A. Smith works for ESPN, been one of the co-hosts for First Take. He has long defended Floyd Mayweather, has had Floyd Mayweather on his show, and has had some really interesting things to say the least, regarding the many allegations of domestic abuse against Floyd Mayweather, some of which he's pled guilty to and served time for. But what he said, we don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on what he said to Carrie Champion. This was on April 8th episode of First Take. They were discussing Floyd Mayweather and that lengthy history with domestic violence. Stephen A. Smith told Carrie Champion that her criticisms of Mayweather's domestic violence record were, quote, unquote, because you're a woman. You should feel that way, end quote. So I want to talk about that. I know, Michelle, because we had a chance to chat before we started recording, I know that you haven't really kept that much up on this story. But do you think that Stephen A. Smith would have said something similar to that if they had been talking about Aaron Hernandez and the allegations against him? I mean, he wouldn't have said, oh, you're critical of Aaron Hernandez and what happened because you're a woman. Why do men still feel like violence against women, rape, why do men still feel like those are issues that are important only to women?
Probably because men are the ones who commit them against the women. And so, in their, the domestic violence and treatment of women, we know the history of probably not just this country, but just the way the world is. Mm-hmm. That's women have been abused for a long time, and overnight, men are just not going to all just say, "Oh, we feel so sorry," because again, most of the time, these things are committed by men, and so it's hard it's easy for me to say I feel awful about that because I'm a woman, so I can sympathize and empathize more because I am a woman, and being in my shoes and seeing another woman, where from the man's standpoint, they are the abuser in most cases. Mm-hmm. So and while some of them do empathize, there are a lot of them out there. It's just not something that they're going to see the same way we see it.
I think it goes back to something that I keep saying on this show, and that is women, despite all the advances that have taken place and all the strides that we've made in recent history, women are still largely viewed as second-class citizens, as less than human beings. If you took the whole male versus female equation out of it, I don't think that anybody would have a problem with thinking it's pretty terrible for someone who outweighs another person by 100 pounds and out-tops them by 3, 4, 5, 6 inches in height, taking advantage of that, either physically and harming them physically, or physically, emotionally, and sexually by raping them, physically inserting their penis or some other object inside their body. I mean, if you just looked at it from that perspective, most people would think, yeah, that's kind of a terrible thing to do to another human being. But for whatever reason, when you insert that, oh, it's a male versus a female, somehow the woman is less than worthy of all the rights that any other human being should enjoy.
Right. I mean, I just think that it's just a difference of one being the victim and one not being the victim. And I can bring a whole bunch of scenarios into this, and where it would be the same exact thing. When you are the person that, are you the one that's victimizing, or are you the victim? You know, and both of you are going to see things differently. And there's nothing, we can't do anything about that. You're going to always see those things differently, no matter what. Even though from the victim standpoint, this should be, you should look at it and be like, wow, you don't have sympathy for that? So I can go on and say, when I keep seeing a kid that gets shot for nothing or for whatever, I can look at that and say, you don't see a problem with that? Where other people, they don't, they see things totally different. We see them totally different.
See, I don't know if I agree with that. Maybe I don't want to agree with it. I do think that if we talk about it with more and more women speaking up, with the Ray Rice video coming out that actually shows men who don't have any experience, or anybody, men and women who don't have any experience with it, that raw video, created it was a very, very much a learning opportunity. I want to think that if we continue to talk about it and continue to expose this discrepancy in how we view it, that it will get better.
I think talking about it is good, but domestic violence didn't start with Ray Rice's video.
No, that's
and
true.
So
Absolutely.
we tend to act like that it did, and we also tend to act like domestic violence is a football issue or domestic violence is a sports. It's not. This is a world issue. Football players are a part of this world, and so they are human like everybody else. Domestic violence. I grew up in a home that was and saw domestic violence every day, so that is something I'm very passionate about. But it didn't start with the Ray Rice video.
No,
and so. That's the problem that I have when this is what we want to talk about it now, because we saw this video, and again, we are a video-conscious world. Well, Greg Hardy, Beast Mode, all of these people had domestic violence issues, but we didn't talk about those. You know why? Because we didn't see a video. They just went, they was charged, and it went by the wayside. But because we saw the video of Ray Rice, that's all everybody wants to talk. This has been an issue. Women, like we said, women have been getting abused, raped, and beaten for decades. This is nothing new. So, yes, we can talk about it because we saw the video and now it's on everybody's conscience. But this is not something new. So, yes, talking about it helps. But, I mean, for decades, this has been going on. I think the problem is not what men feel about it. The problem is what the women feel, how the women feel about themselves. Because women who are abused, a lot of them stay in abusive relationships. A lot of them, this is going to sound funny, when I say they allow themselves to be abused, what I mean is that when they're abused once, they don't leave. They stay in those relationships, and that's how you allow yourself to continue. Now, they have a lot of reasons as to why they don't leave. Some of them are afraid. Some of them don't think they can live without a man. Some of them think they need there are a lot of reasons. There are a number of reasons. But women have to first feel a lot better about themselves so that they don't allow this to happen to them. And when it does, the one time, that they make sure it doesn't happen again. Because they don't have control of when that man is going to do that. I'm not saying that women are the reason why it happens. I'm saying that when it happens, then you have to understand that this is not a person that you can stay with. This is not a person that you need to be around because it's not healthy.
Yeah, a lot of women do try to leave, and when they do, the violence escalates.
Right.
A lot of women are killed.
Right.
The numbers are staggering.
Exactly.
If you know 5 women out there, if you have 5 or 6 women, different women in your life, if you know that number of women, you know a woman who's either been raped or beaten, or both. And
I know all of them.
Yeah, right. I mean, the numbers are set. but that's why, I mean, we have to do something. We can't. We've let it go on too long. We've let it continue.
Right.
Far, far, far too long. We have to continue to talk about it. I refuse to believe that men don't have that ability to empathize. I think that they just haven't been given the opportunity to learn and understand, to have that. No, Stephen A. Smith, maybe not. I mean, anybody who would, who would say kind of what he, but
he said it. He said it enough to know how he feels about it. He said it, and I've heard him on different occasions. So yes, I know. Even though I may have not heard what he said this time, I've heard him on other occasions. So, but again, the thing about Stephen A. Smith is he says what he feels, and he speaks his truth, meaning that's what he feels. He's not the only person who thinks like that. He's probably just the only one willing to say it, and that's where and that's the problem, because there are a lot of idiots just like that who feel that way. But there are also a lot of men who do emphasize. I mean, I know quite a few of them, and it's funny. I just had a friend who texted me. He's a Cowboys fan like me. And he asked me about the Greg Hardy suspension. And he said, I saw whatever he read, the pictures or whatever, and he was like, his comments were, but you can't treat a woman like that. And so he deserved what he got. That's his comment. This is a guy. So there are men who empathize. There are men who understand that. But, it's all in how men were raised, and it's all in what they were taught, and it's all in what they saw in their life. And again, if we can continue to talk about it and they continue to make laws, because the law has decided how people should feel about it. That's what you got to look at. The law has decided how people should feel about rape and domestic violence. When the law does nothing, then that's telling you that that's not a big a deal. The law did nothing. Even in the Ray Rice situation, the only person who did anything was the NFL. Even though people didn't agree with it, they were the only one who did anything.
Well, he did get pretrial diversion, and he is going. He has to do community service, and there are some things that Ray Rice has to do to get that erased from his record. There's definitely reason to criticize the legal profession. They are definitely making strides. They're working hard to try to do better in that area. And I will say this. We're going to take a real quick break and then come back with some Cowboys talk. But I will say this. I don't want Stephen A. Smith. I'm not saying Stephen A. Smith needs to shut up. I want Stephen A. Smith. I want other men who don't get it to continue to speak up, because when you speak up, then we speak back, and then we have a dialogue. If we're not having that dialogue, we don't get to a better understanding of who we are and where we are and what we can do better.
I agree.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to finish up with some sports talk. You guys know I can't do a show without having even more sports talk. We've only tangentially talked about sports. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Sharona Unfiltered.
All right. Thanks again to Michelle Jinks, the Sports Jinks, for joining me in that first part of our recorded interview. We actually are going to take a little bit of a break from all of that. We'll finish up with our Cowboys talk. In the meantime, we're going to have Latoya Peterson up in a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit, though, about that conversation. It's an important discussion for us to have. Actually, as I was sitting here listening to that interview between Michelle and I, made a note. I'm going to do a show that is entirely devoted to domestic violence, to the issue of violence against women, whether it's rape, whether it's assault, whether it's emotional or verbal abuse. You can't go wrong with that whole with the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The thing that really bothers me, I know that there's a lot of talk right now about Stephen A. Smith. Apparently, he's still going on about Floyd Mayweather and the issue of abuse against women, violence against women. I saw that he said that his critics need to grow up. Stephen A. Smith, I would caution you to be very careful what you're saying here. Maybe some of the people who are criticizing you are far more emotionally mature than you are, because I have a real problem with you not recognizing that women are people too. Women are human beings. We are deserving of the same rights that anybody else should enjoy. And you would have a problem with and you've indicated that you've had problems with other issues. You feel like it's appropriate for you to speculate with actually very little evidence, quite frankly, that Chip Kelly is a racist, yet you go to bat for Floyd Mayweather, where the evidence is entirely against you, by the way. So maybe you should sit and consider whether or not you are intellectually dishonest with what you're doing here. I don't know why men don't understand. The Ray Rice video helped. Having that visual, being able, and it's not just men, for anyone who has not been associated with, who doesn't have any experience with domestic violence, that video was important. I know that Janae Palmer does not care to have it, and I completely can sympathize and understand why she doesn't want her personal life to be the subject of so much media discussion and so much media talk, and having that video out there. I mean, that has to be horrible for her personally, but from a discussion standpoint, from a standpoint of having that learning experience, it is very important, because it did give people that didn't have that background, that didn't have that the understanding of what we're talking about when we talk about violence against women. It was a good source for that. Being able to see what it's like for a man who outweighs a woman, easily by 100 pounds, if not greater, to ball up his fist and hit her, in the face, knocking her out. It's watching her being dragged out of the elevator. The whole Floyd Mayweather thing is, Floyd Mayweather has gotten very much a pass for his very lengthy history of abuse against women, his misogynistic comments. The situation between Stephen A. Smith, though, and Carrie Champion is going to be another show episode that we're going to have very, very, very soon. As I mentioned, there will be no show this Wednesday. I will be flying to Chicago, and in Chicago covering the NFL draft, and just opted not to do that show. We'll come back on Monday. We're going to have a catch up kind of show with Robin Monday. She's going to be my co-host. We'll have a guest on. Not sure exactly who we're going to have on, but it's going to be a fun show. Then on Wednesday of next week, a week from this coming Wednesday, May the 6th, a gaming episode. Owen Good from Polygon will be our guest. And we're also going to have some female gamers on, and we're going to talk about the gaming industry. We're going to talk about what it means to be a female gamer. We're going to talk about gaming in general. Really excited about that show. I think that it's a good topic. It's an important topic. We're seeing a lot of I've talked about esports a lot, not just on this show, but on the show that I co-host with Fast I Hurt. E-gaming is becoming bigger. We saw that on. I missed all the twittering last night about ESPN2 airing a live video game competition. You're going to see more of that. Listen, you may not like it. E-gaming is here. It's here, and I think that it's here to stay. And I think that it's very much going to be a wave of the future. And I'm excited about it as a gamer. I can't tell you how excited about it. So I'm excited to bring you guys that show that's devoted to gaming and to highlight some female gamers and to have them, because you've heard me talk a little bit about it, I'm going to let them talk to you about what it means to be a female gamer. And there's a lot of discussion too right now about Gamergate. We'll talk about Gamergate as well. In the weeks after that, probably the week after that, we are going to definitely, you heard it here, it's a done deal. We are going to have a show that is devoted to what how women are portrayed in the media. Carrie Champion having to sit there and listen to what Stephen A. Smith is spewing and not getting any respect for her point of view. His very dismissive comments, oh, you just feel that way like because you're a woman. No, listen here, mother humper, she's a human being. We're human beings. Why are you not disgusted by abuse against another human being? Why don't you have that? I have real questions about why you don't have that empathy. Why you go around and uh, downplay the very seriousness of the issue. And so we're going to have a show that's devoted to how women, the Britt McHenry situation, Carrie Champion being told she just has an opinion about domestic abuse because she's a woman, when there are plenty of men out there who understand that it's wrong and take that point of view. We're going to have that discussion, and we're going to also have a show that is devoted entirely to domestic violence, the long-term effects that come from domestic violence, not just when it happens to you personally, but when you see it, when it happens in your family. Maybe you grew up, maybe your mother or your father. It happens to men too. One of your parents, one of your family members, maybe they were abused in their relationship. We'll have that conversation. I think that that's going to be a very good show. We'll have some women on who have that experience. So really excited about that. We're going to take a quick break, though. When we come back, we're going to have Latoya Peterson on in a few minutes. Very excited to talk to her. She's a writer, writes for Fusion as well as for Racialicious. A quick break. When we come back, talking about writing and other topics. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Sharona Unfiltered. All right, welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Sharona Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sharona. Big shout out to Michelle Jinks. She joined me last night. We pre-recorded our interview with her. We played the majority of it. We still have about 30 more minutes to play. We have some Cowboys talk that we're going to hit you guys up with. We had a little bit of a heated discussion about Greg Hardy, so you'll definitely want to stay tuned in for that. But I'm going to be joined here in a minute by Latoya Peterson. Latoya is a writer. She writes for, as I've mentioned, she writes for Fusion, Fusion.net. She writes for for Racialicious, both websites that are devoted to bringing you a good mixture of topics, a good mixture of content. I'm really interested to hear her talk about the poetry that she's been featuring. Interpretive poetry was something that I wasn't all that familiar with, but it's great, and it's fascinating. It's a blending and an interaction between written word. It's poets who stand up, they're on camera, they're reading their poetry, they're interpreting their poetry. She had a great one that revolved around the topic of rape. There was another one that revolved around the topic of being a biracial woman and what that meant. So I'm really interested to get her perspective on that and to talk to her. So without further ado, we're going to bring her in now. Latoya, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. It was so hard for me to figure out when you first so graciously agreed to come on the show. I was like, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. I really wanted to talk about politics, but the way this show sort of formed, I ended up deciding that we would talk about writing. I wanted to get a little bit of background from you. Do you consider yourself a writer, and did you write a lot when you were growing up?
Totally. That is the thing I normally identify with the most, a writer, because I feel like it's a term that kind of encompasses all of the things that I do, as opposed to more specific terms like journalist or, playwright or screenwriter. Writer is just kind of something that always feels like it fit. And, I've been writing stories as long as I can remember. I think my earliest memory of people taking my writing seriously was I had this third grade teacher. His name was Mr. Allen. He was great. And I had broken my wrist, and I couldn't write, and I was really devastated. And so he gave me time with the teacher's assistant, this girl named Missy. And every day, Missy would write stories that I would dictate.
That is
so I had
so
this
awesome.
journal. Yeah, I had this journal full of
teacher.
the stories that I was telling Missy. Oh, my arm was broken, but I was like, that was third grade, and I guess it was important enough. He was like, okay, well, you should keep telling stories, and it just continued from there. I was at these. Actually, if I can think back even further, first grade, I had a teacher that took me and two other students out, and while everyone else was working on the basic reading assignment, whatever, they let us write stories. And we would write about grief and myths, and we would write about all these different things. We'd read kind of way ahead of grade level. And my teachers were always very accommodating to whatever imaginary world in my head was going on. And so I think no one was surprised when I ended up falling into writing as a profession.
I want to do a show where we talk about the college experience and teachers who have made it. I've had some great teachers. I've been fortunate to have great teachers as well who have really fostered my writing and other creative endeavors that I've been involved in. That's so great. I broke my arm too as I was entering kindergarten, which kind of threw a kink into things. Did you have any favorite authors growing up?
Oh my God, thousands. I mean, I literally, this used to be a point of pride and discussion. I literally read through the fiction section of my middle school library. I was always at the library. And so, there were just so many different authors that I loved and that I connected with, and that I just always wanted to experience new worlds. There was oh my God, so much young adult fiction. I'm trying to think of what was a really, really big influence, or the biggest things. God, I loved all of Francesca Leah Block's books, right? Except for Weetzie Bat. For some reason, her most famous book never really resonated with me. Effie Hinton and The Outsiders, of course, and then I read all of her books over time. All of the Dicey Tillerman saga. What is she wrote that? Cynthia Voigt. Everything that was Dicey Tillerman. I read a lot of poetry. I read anything, honestly, that I could get my hands on, and that
I did too.
Was interesting to me.
If I
right?
could get my hands on it, I read it. Yeah. No, I completely. I was younger than my siblings by a large amount, and so even though there were other kids in and out, I was young, and it was almost like I was an only child, but I was also very much a loner. And I would go places. I would find my little hidden spots where I could get away from everybody, and I would just read. My parents really kind of got a little concerned about me. They were like, "You need to get out and socialize," but I'm reading. But I think that was great for me because it opened up a lot of horizons. I was able to visit places and see things and get perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like, I also feel like, particularly for those of us, like, I grew up in an environment where a lot of kids didn't necessarily get a lot of things. And so reading was this way to travel without going anywhere, where you could be in somebody else's life. It was even, as I read almost as much as I played video games back then. Which was
Oh, you
like
play
hours
video
and
games
hours.
too? You're like my new best
Yes.
friend. Now, did you keep a journal growing up?
Off and on, off and on. I was never really a big journaler, even though it always seemed very cool. So, like, I would watch shows like Ghost Rider, Doug, and everybody had, like, all the moody writers had their journals. But I could never really stick to one journal for a long time. I always wanted to kind of weave in and out. I didn't really get into journaling for a long time until the advent of the internet and when LiveJournal popped up. I ended up using a competing service that's no longer in existence called Easy Journal. And I would just write, like, there at one point, I think 7 years of my life had been documented on Easy Journal. Again, not every single day. I've never been that person because I was writing, like, fiction, nonfiction. Like, I was just doing whatever I felt like. But there was, like, a good archive of, like, age, 18 till about age 25 that lived on Easy Journal until they killed the service and took everything off the servers.
I was very sporadic keeping a journal as well, although as it turned out, I sat down a few years ago and went back through all of my old writing, going back to being a young kid, because my parents kept all that. They kept all my journals, my diaries, and everything. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I can see that my poetry was sort of like a journal.
Definitely. And it's like, I feel as though, people really, really focus on, like, journaling and making sure you do the same thing every single day. But poetry is a big way of people recording kind of what happens to them. And for me, like, I used to love writing poetry because it felt like a code, right, where it wasn't, like, I always felt like journals could be found or somebody could read it. This was also, like, pre-Facebook. So, like, slam books were still, like, a thing where you could, get somebody's journal and read about it. Or, like, that happened to a girl at our school even, that somebody had found, like, one of her private notebooks and passed it around. And so I was always worried about that. But poems allowed for, because you were using so much rich imagery and metaphor and stuff like that, for you to talk about something that was going on with you, but then to kind of code it in a language that only you understood, that the reader might have something completely different on it. And so I really gravitated toward poetry all the way through my adolescence. I think I stopped writing poetry around like 20 or 21, but that was only because I started experimenting with other forms like screenwriting and things like that. But definitely poetry from about 14 to 20.
Yeah, our backgrounds really kind of mirror each other because I did that same thing, and for a lot of the same reasons. You don't want, still am really a very private person. You don't want people intruding on too much on your personal private thoughts. Yet you want to convey the emotion. I have found that writing and now talking, being blessed enough to have this outlet, it really does give you an opportunity to release those those emotions that build up inside you. And so it's very much a creative outlet, but yet it's almost like therapy in a way.
Oh, totally. I feel like writing has been the best therapist I've ever had in my life, right? Because it allows you to, like, do something for all those emotions and feelings and rage and pain. And I feel like, any time that I've been divorced from, like, my writing self has been a time of really, like, stressful circumstances in my life, whereas when I'm able to write and put things to the page, and even, no matter what form it comes out in, it's something that's just healing about that action of taking,
it really is.
That muddle of emotion and imagery in your head and, the wrongs and your interpretation of it and all of that stuff that's there, and forcing it to kind of be funneled out onto the page. be that
It
page
can be
like
very
digital course, or be that page like with pen and ink. But there's something I feel like healing about that motion.
Yeah, it can be very cathartic. It definitely can be. Now, do you have a process that you go through as you write? Do you, some writers sit down and you shut off their phones and what have you. Do you have a process that you go through?
I always wish I was that romantic about it. Where it was like, I was like, oh, I have a writing process, and I'll sit down in my writing room in my desk with one orchid and make myself English breakfast tea. But I am not desperate. I write. I guess I write kind of like my life is, like chaos, just whatever. I'll write on the backs of business cards and napkins. I write on, my hand sometimes. I'll write on, I'll type it out on my phone, or I'll just if it needs to come out, it's out. Like that's it. I guess I've been doing it for so long, I don't think about it in the terms of like, it's hard to say because, I do this professionally now, and there's definitely like a zone you have to get into to really, flow and have good work. But writing to me has never been like this precious action that I'm doing. It's been such a hardwired part of myself that it's I think no more about it than I think about breathing.
The transition for me from writing for myself or writing because I had to writing as a profession, as a business, it was a little hard for me. Did you experience something like that?
Yeah, it can be a little bit jarring, and it's weird because I went through this transition of being in the blogosphere, right? And the blogosphere, back when I got into it, maybe like 2006, 2007, it wasn't seen as a professional space then, right? Now, there were interesting people there, but it was not seen as professional. And so this idea that you were going to be writing for publication wasn't there. It just was not there. And so what ended up happening was you were writing for an audience that was not yourself. And that was the thing that kept pushing you to be a better and better writer, because you kept writing for the commentary. You kept writing for the commenters, for the people who would attack your piece. And that kind of honed you into a much better writer, I think, than you could be now, or that you could be just going through, like, particularly like a one editor or two editors process, because it's so public and your mistakes are so painful when you do them. It's interesting, too, because I've always drawn a very strict line between my public writing and my private writing, right? There's writing that I do just for myself that's not for publication, that's not for anybody but just me. And there's writing that I do for the public. And so I think that keeps me from feeling as though I have to, switch around or mutate things or change how I would say things, because there's parts of me, there's topics that I write for that are just for myself that I don't really bridge. And so I have a very big, like, public boundary of, like, okay, this is what I'll release, and this is what's just for me. Because some things I want it to be exactly the way I wrote it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want an editor touching it. I don't want anything. It's just my words. And other things that are more commercial, I think about them more as products. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm selling this, and so this has to be this way, and this has to be that way, and, I'll make it happen that way. But because I keep them separate, I think I don't have the same kind of, somewhat work existential crisis that I feel like other writers might go through when they're trying to transition from, their beautiful, beautiful prose and then having to, essentially sell your baby on the open market.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I found that some of my best, or at least I feel like some of my best writing comes from the topics that I write on that I'm passionate about. I write about domestic violence because I have that background. I write about rape because I have that in my background. I've worked with domestic violence, and so these are all topics that I've been involved with and I'm passionate about. And it's those that I have the hardest. I don't mind editing, my informational articles. I can edit easy peasy, but the topics that I write about that I'm so passionate about, I really have a hard time editing those. And it is because of what you just said. You put it out there the way that you want it to be, and it's kind of like your baby in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It is in a lot of ways. It is. I think this is one of the reasons I've been reluctant to publish a book, because a book is a different kind of thing than your writing that you would do for magazines or short form. It's long form, and it is a longer relationship, and it's a longer process, and then it's a process you undergo normally as an editor. And so unless you self-publish, the book is not just your voice. It's going to be someone else's voice. And I think I've had a lot of problems trying to reconcile those two things, that I would be spending a lot of time and love and energy on this project and then finding somebody that matches that enough for me to want to keep dealing with, changing around what I want to say and what I want to do in order to make it better, hopefully. Finding that person is kind of like, I feel like getting into a marriage.
Yeah. The whole process, the thought of writing a book, I've always wanted to write a book. I have not yet started that process because it's so daunting to me. Writing has been such a big part of my life that there's a part of me that doesn't want to turn it into quote unquote work, if that makes any sense.
Mhm. No, it totally makes sense, because it's interesting. Yeah, I talk to my friends about things. People who have things that they're passionate about, and in this era where everything needs to be monetized, everything needs to be, everything needs to be optimized to its maximum level. And did you get enough readers? Did you get enough clicks? I think there is a fatigue that happens where you're like, sometimes I don't want to keep this for me. Like, I don't want this to be in a competition. It needs to exist on its own. So I can totally see where that comes from.
I want to ask you about interpretive poetry. I wasn't familiar until I started, and I don't know how I wasn't. I guess because poetry to me is so personal, and I'm not all that good about going out. I need to do better and intend to do better about looking at others' poetry. But I'm new to interpretive poetry. I really like it. How long has this been around? How did you find out about it? Tell us a little bit about that part of what you've been writing about.
Yeah, so interpretive poetry is also kind of newer to me, right? I was more versed in kind of like classics and what we do, and of course, like the internet has been happening. Of course, it was going to influence poets. I just didn't look at that side of myself reflected in the internet gaze until recently, when it was National Poetry Month. And I was like, well, I don't want to do just, it's Poetry Month, let's do something. Right? I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to matter. And we're really big at Fusion on challenging form and format, looking at how we tell stories and how we do things differently in this very digital age. And so my friend Lam, who's the first piece that I published on, which is her interpretation of This Is Just to Say, I saw it on her website, and I was like, oh, what is this? It's beautiful. And it turns out there was a whole movement of people, particularly because Lam comes from a very strong photojournalism and documentary background. And it's kind of like, for them, it's a visual exercise, right, to take a beautiful poem that you love and then interpret it visually. And people have very different ideas of what that interpretation could be. Like that poem in particular, I think it's William Carlos Williams. This Is Just to Say, and it's the one about, I ate all the plums in the icebox. I'm sorry, but they were delicious and cold. And that poem in particular has a bunch of interpretations online, and everyone does it differently. Right. But I love Lam's because she took it out of the context that I think in context that people would assume it was American, even if it might not be, and put it in Hong Kong and has a woman. And it was just the way that she told the story gave a whole different life, I felt like, to that poem. And so when I started looking for more, and particularly on Vimeo hosts a lot of this visual interpretive poetry, that's when I got to the Learning to Skin poem. That's when you referred to about the mixed race black woman. It's wonderful and amazing, and it's so visceral, and it's so painful, but so beautiful, and it was just so beautifully thought out. And I just loved how people are taking the form of poetry, right, and really playing with the boundaries. The one I posted today from Fong Tran is called Dear Young Men of Color, and it's kind of like, it's a love note, but it's also like a performance art piece that I kind of like. So you see the men, as he's reciting the poem, you see their faces react to it. They're all dressed in similar fashions, and they're of, different hues and different ethnic backgrounds. But you watch them react to the things that he's saying, even though they don't speak necessarily. It's on their faces. And that, to me,
I can't wait to check that out.
Yeah, it was as riveting to me as what Fong was saying, just watching the men's reactions. And, when you talk about the part about them being statistics, seeing people, visibly swallow back hurt, swallow back pain. And then when you see, he goes into this part about, seeing glory and persevering and rising above what's been happening, and you literally see one man stand taller, and it's just like, it's a wonderful thing to not only experience it, but to see it in that way.
Yeah, when you stop to think about it, interpretive poetry, it sort of is almost a natural progression of the writing process, the social media era that we are living in, the television, the millennial age where kids grew up on television. Television informed who they are, was that foundation that built who they are, and in that sense, I'm kind of surprised that I'm so new to it, but it's lovely and it's great, and it really is. It does hit you in a visceral fashion because you do see the emotion, and you hear the emotion in their voices.
Mhm. Totally. It's interesting too because a poem is something that's so personal, and it has. I feel like, particularly after doing this 2-week experiment, essentially, it has a lot of different lives, right? So a poem lives just on the page, right? And it means one thing, and then you shade it with whatever you have. And then if someone reads the poem, they're shading the poem with, that extra layer of voice and tone and emphasis. And then if you look at a visual interpretive poem, right, they're changing the format of poem. Then I was looking at some gift poems that I'll probably publish a little bit later in the week. And when people have done interpretations, but it's in like these gift sets. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, there's just so many different ways that a poem can live, and a poem can be seen. That it's just phenomenal. I love what's been happening with poetry, and I can't wait to see what the future continues to hold.
Yeah, I can't either. What other trends do you see in poetry?
I think that we're starting to get to a point where there's this resurgence of poetic activism, right? And that doesn't say that poems haven't always been active, though it's interesting that connotation. Poems are going to be about love. Poems are going to be about romance. Poems are going to be about beauty. And that's the example, whereas, I come from a conversation where it's like slam poetry. It's very political. And to see kind of poetry as political response become more emergent is amazing. I was watching this guy, Kealoha. He did a TED Talk from Hawaii, and he was a scientist. And he felt as though people weren't getting into science, particularly young men of color from the Hawaiian Islands, weren't getting into science because there was no story behind it. So he started combining these two loves of his, of scientific understanding and theory with, these conversations that happen in poetry and form. And they ended up making this wonderful thing called the poetry of us. How did we get together? How did we come to be in both a evolutionary sense and a biological sense? And it's just this wonderful thing that I think only could have been born from those two loves meeting, right? It's just amazing. And so I think we'll see more of that. We'll also see more. There's a poem that I think I'll put up tomorrow that's about, it's called The Rig Game. And it was like the national poetry competition. This kid is talking about the plight of bilingual education and No Child Left Behind. And he does it in verse, so it's a poem. But it's a very, very calculated political statement. And I think that, as the times call for it, poets are starting to really push the boundaries of where poetry should be and how poetry fits in, and even what the popular perception of poetry is.
There's so much that you can do with poetry. I think it's brilliant. That whole concept of interpretive poetry and including the audience is frankly brilliant. I'm surprised that we haven't seen more of that. And there's so much that you could. I'm really excited about the future of what poetry can become. But I want to talk to you real quick. And so much to talk about, so little time. You had a really good article. I think it was on Fusion. I know that you write for Racial Issues too, but it was talking about comedians. What we're living in an age, comedians, comedy. I don't want to say that it's under it. There's a lot of discussion about. We talked about the Trevor Noah backlash. the whole concept of choosing, to me, and I think that comedy is so great and it has so many great qualities, but I think that more and more people are starting to look at what comedians choose to kind of hone their claws on. We're seeing a little bit of a backlash, and the Adam Sandler. There was a really good article this morning on Racialicious about Adam Sandler, his new quote unquote movie in Native Americans. Do you think that? First of all, let me ask you this: was the backlash over the Trevor Noah tweets? Did you think that was fair or unfair?
Well, I think that comedy is a really, really complex thing to distill down to like one format, right? On one hand, I can totally be sympathetic to people because your Twitter stream is at least a reflection of who you are, right, in some way. You're trying out material, and in the same way that you want to take credit for jokes that, in the comedian's parlance that land, the jokes that do well, you also kind of have to take responsibility for the jokes that don't, and the jokes that, some people found offensive, some people feel as though are offensive. We published a piece on Fusion by Katie Halper, who was a Jewish comedian who talked a lot about kind of where she felt like the tweets fell, and her perception with it. At the same time, I feel as though the existence of Twitter is this strange double-edged sword for comedians in particular, because comedians tend to evolve, right? And they tend to keep moving past old material. So it's almost, it's weird to be like, we're going to talk about Chris Rock's new movie, but we're going to judge him by this stand-up bit that he did 20 years ago. It doesn't mean that it's never appropriate to bring up, old stand-up, stuff like that, but it does mean that it's harder now for these days for people to move past things that they may have done before. And to address, even if they've addressed it, even if they moved on, even if they refuted it, right, and they said, I don't do this anymore, or there's a lot of comedians that have dropped sets completely. But now in the age of YouTube and the age of Twitter, these things will live on. So even the comedians like, look, I don't do that kind of comedy anymore. I'm done. Like, that was a dark phase in my life. Maybe I was on drugs. Who knows? Now I don't do that any longer. Yeah. It's much harder to erase that. But I feel like comedians are supposed to be in conversation with their audience. And I feel as though if Trevor Noah wants to really make an impact, he's going to have to address this in a way that shows that he is not insensitive or bigoted, but rather making a very smart commentary on these issues. The problem is that everybody has different tastes, everybody has different ideas of what smart commentary is. And, I think it'll remain to be seen until we can see his work on The Daily Show probably in, September, before we can see where he is, if growth actually happened, if this is indicative of his current style, or if it was, old tweets taken out of context the way that he is and Comedy Central are trying to spin.
I feel like comedians want to think, they want to, they say that, comedians will say that they don't have a problem with lines being drawn, and you have to step across that line to know where it is and to help formulate it. Yet comedians don't like to be criticized personally, and they definitely don't like to see other comedians criticized. You saw that in the very good article that you posted. Jim Norton had some really interesting things to say about that process. But again, if your audience, comedians have to listen to their audience to kind of know where that line is, don't they?
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think that one of the biggest issues with understanding kind of like what you can say and what you can't say is that it gets to these very sticky realms of art and commentary and what, and what's allowable versus what you're actually saying. And it's too complex to really legislate with one, and I use legislate in terms to mean how people want situations to be handled with one pat rule, right? Can you make a feminist rape joke? Can you make a feminist dick joke? Right? You can, but it's very difficult to do so. And then you get all this interference from people who might not necessarily understand the joke or care about the joke or even be interested in your type of comedy, right? I think about this a lot in terms of both art and games, right? Video games in particular, because when they start playing with very, very traditional formats of storytelling, or when they talk about things that are historical, tend to get a lot of flack from people. I spent, a few mornings not too long ago arguing with a woman who was like, there should never be a game about slavery. And to me, I'm like, of course there should be a game about slavery. It's all about execution. And, I could not get this woman at all to be like, well, I don't, to ever budge on the fact that a game about slavery might be instructive, might be interesting, and might be more compelling than just reading a very sanitized version of what happened in a current textbook. Because to her, games would never be able to do that, right? And so it's really hard to tell someone that they can't ever do something because so much of it lies in the execution. And yes, there are going to be comedians that are terrible and they do terrible jobs at, looking at these hard issues. But for everyone that does a terrible job, there's someone doing an amazing job and an illuminating job. And the problem is they both kind of exist in the same space.
You hit on the key word there, and that is execution. Lindy West wrote a fabulous piece about rape jokes and how to handle that. The best comedy, comedy at its best serves as a mechanism, in my opinion, as a mechanism to advance the conversation, to uplift, to instead of beating down or denigrating. And I think that it's fair to ask, what role comedy and comedians in general should play in having these discussions, because when they don't listen to the audience, when they don't listen to what the groups that they're making fun of, when they don't listen to those points of view, their comedy, as you mentioned earlier, doesn't evolve.
Totally. And it's, and that question also becomes like, how well do comedians take criticism? Because, it's one of those things. It's always a hard line to fight. We're between like, staying very true to your voice and understanding the jokes that you want to hear, and then listening to the critiques. People like, oh, this might not be for them, or this might not be something they want, but at the same time also balancing against, and particularly for people who have been historically very privileged in life in various ways, to make sure that your comedy isn't adding on to an already very burdensome history of when, these things have been used for, used to marginalize people, used to hold people down. It's very complex.
And that's the thing. A lot of comedy takes advantage of those groups that have been marginalized. Fat chicks, Native Americans, the whole rape scenario as well. Did you mentioned video games and the video game about slavery? There is a video game out that deals with street harassment. Have you seen it? Had a chance to see the promotional articles about it?
I think I have heard of what you did, but I didn't play it, so I couldn't comment on it.
I haven't played it either. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I haven't played it either. I'm aware that it's out there. When I first saw it, I was like, ooh. But then I read about it, and I was like, oh, in the execution, it sounds like they're tackling this in the right way, and it really does all go back to execution, how you execute those things.
Exactly, and that's such a hard thing. Like I had a friend of mine once told me that as an artist himself, right, he refused to critique a work he had not experienced. And in the time that he told me, this is, years and years ago, I was like, well, come on, Joe. Like, we saw a video of it. Like, the work is the work. Like, what are you making excuses for? And now that, particularly as I've become more fluent in art and what artists are doing and the types of spaces that are created, it is very difficult to judge a work and not be in the same space of it to experience it for yourself. I'm starting to really come around to the idea that you can't judge a work secondhand or thirdhand based on what somebody said, because they might leave out key words, key phrases, key pieces of that would make that context or that overall thing snap into focus, right? And so I do think that, artists to be experiencing, it's okay to opt out of something, saying, I don't want to deal with this, or this is not art that appeals to me. And that's totally fine. It's just, it gets into very interesting and dicey territory if we are trying to definitively make judgments on things that we haven't experienced for ourselves and that we haven't seen. And part of that judgment is saying that other people should not see or experience this thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You have to have context, and you have to, I don't want to say immerse yourself, but you have to have a good background on something before you start to have. I said criticism. I prefer the word dialogue. Even though you're maybe not agreeing with some things, when you say criticism, when you say I'm being critical, that has such a negative perception to it. I prefer the word dialogue because that contemplates that the two sides would have a discussion, as productive as it possibly can be about the issues that are being raised, and it's only through that dialogue or through that discussion that you can come to a better understanding of where we are and how we can do better.
Totally. And I think that it's interesting, too, because people have started to really shy away from criticism in recent years, and they forget that, people like Roger Ebert were doing such a huge service to artists, right? So it's very easy to get in your feelings about, this criticism is terrible, whatever. But criticism also, at its best, kind of makes you a better artist, right? Allows you to address things you hadn't seen. And it also allows for this interesting kind of footnote to your art. That why did this resonate at what time? What was happening in the culture to create such an audience for your work? What's going on? And, these critics in a lot of ways are also functioning as kind of like ethnographers and archaeologists to figure out kind of where your work fits in this montage of and landscape of society. And so it's very easy to malign critics. It's very hard to understand that that there is a huge use for the folks who are going through and saying, and being more discerning about art and being discerning about what is being produced. Because if not, it's very easy to start seeing a lot more mass-produced things without somebody going, okay, well, this looks like the last 9 things that we've heard. Can we look at something that's original, something that's different?
I could keep you here forever. I've already kept you longer than I was supposed to. I'm so sorry about that. But I have to ask you, you mentioned video games. Video games is a hobby. It's a passion of mine. What kind of games do you play?
I am a JRPG person and a fighter game. So I love big explorers. Right, it's interesting because the same reason I love Final Fantasy is the same reason I love Grand Theft Auto. Right, it allows you to just go and be in this game world and immerse yourself completely into what's going on. I also love fighting games, Tekken, Soul Blade, things like that. Platformers. I play a lot of different things. I'm just a big fan of art forms.
I love role playing games as well. I'm really right now my big gaming obsession is really the best word to use. My gaming obsession right now, I'm playing Dragon Age Inquisition. It's the third in the Dragon Age series, and it's a really good game. I didn't think that it was a great sequel, but it's a great game in and of itself. So we really do have a lot in common. I've really enjoyed having you on the show this morning. I hope that you'll come back. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. But before you get out of here, we really just dived right in. Tell everybody again who you are, where they can find you, where they can find your writing, where they can find you out there in the social media land.
Perfect. All right. So I'm Latoya Peterson. I write and I am the deputy editor of Voices over at Fusion, and so that's fusion.net section Voices. I am also the publisher of racialicious.com, which is about race and pop culture. And then you can also always see me on Twitter or Tumblr, both with my name, Latoya Peterson.
Great stuff. I really have enjoyed reading the things that are being produced at fusion.net as well as at Racialicious. I know you guys took a break over there. Again, that's a great article that came out this morning talking about the Adam Sandler movie. Thanks again for joining me. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the final portion of my interview with Michelle Jinks, we're going to talk some Dallas Cowboys. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Sharona Unfiltered.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Hey, yeah,
All right, welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Sharona Unfiltered. I am your host, Sharona. Shout out to Latoya Peterson for joining me in our last segment. I could have talked to Latoya all day long. I apologize for keeping her over a little bit over our allotted time period. We're gonna run over a little bit today because we do still have the final part of my interview with Michelle Jinks. We have to bring you guys some sports talk. I am Sports by Sharona, so we have to do that. So we'll run over a little bit today, but that's all right. We're going to bring Michelle back in. We're going to finish up with our discussion, a little heated discussion on Greg Hardy, so stay tuned in.
All right, we are back. You are tuned in to Sharona Unfiltered. I'm your host, Sharona. I'm joined by Michelle Jinks, the Sports Jinks. We had a great discussion in the first part of the show about writing and media and what it means to be a woman in sports media and what it should mean to be a woman in sports media. That's going to be a topic, a big topic that I'm going to be talking about in the shows to come, probably in a couple of weeks. Like I said, when I get back from Chicago, we're really gonna focus on that. I think that we need to change the perception of how we cover issues like domestic violence and rape and other things. But we want to talk a little bit about the Cowboys, and Michelle obviously is, she's the official Cowboys fan reporter for NFL Female. She's a fan. We mentioned just briefly Greg Hardy. He's obviously the big news for the Dallas Cowboys. Greg Hardy was charged with domestic violence against his girlfriend at that time. Her name was Nicole Holder. It went through the legal process. He was convicted in a bench trial that is set up to operate very much like small claims court. He appealed, as one does, and the case was allegedly settled. It does look like the case was settled. And then dismissed because of that, and the witness didn't cooperate, which definitely does happen. I had a chance to talk to Patrick Kahn, who covers the Cowboys for Draft Cowboys, about the fan reaction, and he said that it was divided between men were more okay with it than women were because of the issue of domestic violence. I thought that was rather curious, but it definitely does sort of mirror what we see in society, doesn't it, Michelle?
It does. I mean, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Men and women are going to feel different about this situation. And you're going to have some women who feel the same way as Stephen A. Smith. You're going to have some, I mean, you do. I mean, and then you're going to have, because, again, that's just what society tells them to think. And then you're going to have some men who feel like a lot of women, that, domestic violence is something that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm a Cowboy. Yeah.
So, do you say he got the NFL, obviously was subject to the domestic violence policy. He got 10 games. They're going to appeal that. The NFLPA has indicated that they might possibly sue over that. What did you think about the suspension?
I thought the suspension was more games than I thought he would have gotten. I believe when they created the policy, I thought that your first offense was like 4 games, and then your second offense you would be banned from the league. So I was expecting him to get suspended for 4 games, maybe 6, 4 to 6 games with a healthy fine. That's what I thought that they would give him. Probably 4 games with a fine as well. 10 games I thought was excessive. Being that they created a policy, so then you created the policy, but then you're not following the policy. And so what made you decide to do 10 games? Considering that, I thought they would also consider that he did not play last year, even though he got paid, but he still didn't play a game, and so that's why I thought that they would give him a fine to get some of the money, to get more money out of him. But I thought it was a healthy fine, and I figured that they would appeal it to see if they can get less games than that.
Yeah, it's going to be appealed. There are a lot of moving pieces to this. We talked about this in pretty good detail last Friday on Game Over with Einstein and Sharona. It was interesting. The NFL has this new domestic violence. I don't know that this is actually what they call it. This is what everybody's calling it. It's a task force headed by Lisa Friel. Lisa Friel has a major background in dealing with this issue. She's a former prosecutor, head of the Sex Crimes Division, Manhattan Sex Crimes Division. So she's got a lot of knowledge here. She spearheaded and conducted the investigation. The NFL issued a very lengthy statement on it, and what the NFL, through its investigation, what it discovered was that there were 4 separate incidents of violence on the night in question, and one of them that led to separate injuries, and this was all photographed. There was photographic evidence of the injuries. Obviously, we haven't seen the photographs. We will not see the photographs unless somehow it gets leaked, because the NFL had to get permission to be able to view all that. The thing that was concerning to most everyone was the incident where he choked her. He put his hands around her throat and he choked her. And so the NFL found that violated the personal conduct policy. But then there was another interesting thing, and something that I don't think that we can overlook here. The NFL found that Greg Hardy did not cooperate fully and provide complete and accurate information in the investigation. And so when you have those, and when that happens, there's going to be an extra punishment associated with it. That's just the way it is. If lying to investigators is a no-no. And so I think that it was more than I expected too, Michelle. Let me just go ahead and say that right now. It was more, but I didn't have the high expectations. The initial suspension in Ray Rice's case was 2 games. Now, the NFL, freaked out when it realized everybody was really upset about that. And, and a lot of things happen. We don't have time to go into all of that. But, 10 games, the so-called amended, updated domestic violence policy, which is just part of the personal conduct policy. There's already a personal conduct policy in the CBA, but the NFL wants to redo it, and it does contemplate 6 games. So they get 6 games for for the acts, the 4 separate acts on the night in question, and then get 6 games for that, and then get 4 games for what happened in the investigation. The league didn't specify any of that. It just said that 10 games. It could get reduced. I think if it does, we're looking at 6 to 8 games maybe. Will people feel better about that? Does that give everybody a happy? Is that a happy ending? we all like happy endings, right? I guess we'll see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just don't agree with all of that they're saying. I mean, it's one incident. Now, you can break it up and however you want to break it up. It's one incident, it's one case, and so 10 games, if you added that, then you're doing that because you're trying to appeal outside interest. That has nothing to, that's just my opinion about it. Mm-hmm. If you put a policy in place, then follow the policy. If not, then you're saying that you're just going to do public opinion about every incident. And so, living in Charlotte, we saw the stuff when it happened. I thought I saw the pictures of the lady's face. I heard about the choke and all of that I already knew. That's nothing that they reported was new to me that they didn't report when this happened. And again, he sat out all last year, so that couldn't be anything that they just found out just now. They had to, you know what I'm saying? It wouldn't have taken that long to know that because all of that stuff I already knew. So, I mean, I just think it's just one incident. I thought 10 games was excessive. I thought it would be 4 to 6 games. That's what I thought, and I thought that would have been, which is a stiff penalty in itself. In NFL, when you miss games, you only play 16. So, you know, it's not comparable to basketball or baseball if that was all you was getting. That's like that's like nothing for them. But for the NFL, that's a lot of games.
Yeah, when you see guys get suspended at baseball for PED violation, it's always, you see 50 games, you're like, 50 games. It is different, obviously, because there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more games in the NFL. There's 16 games. I think that we're going to move on because we want to talk about actual Cowboys stuff. But you have to, and I understand where you're coming from. I think that Lisa Friel obviously is an attorney, and she's going to conduct these with that background in mind. And from her perspective, just whether you agree or not, or think that it should be done this way, she looks at it from that legal background, right? And from a legal perspective, it is 4 separate incidents, 4 separate assault charges right there. It's not just one. It's not just one incident. So when you have to understand kind of where she's coming from, and I understand where Michelle's coming from. I understand but regardless, right now it's 10 games. I guess we'll see what happens with it. It's kind of an interesting little epilogue to all of that. Have you kept up with some of the things that have happened in the last few days with him, with the car, and then he got into what people were saying was a verbal altercation, which I don't know what that means. Have you paid any attention to any of that?
Is this Greg Hardy we're talking about?
Yeah.
No, I try not. I don't really keep up with much of what these guys do when the season is not going on, because they have too much time to get into trouble, and every little thing is going to be reported on TV. So I try to focus on the field stuff, and unless they killed somebody or raped somebody or molested a kid, violence, something violent like that. I try not to pay too much attention to every little incident that they do. I mean, because you're going to see so many things with players getting in trouble. I think it was a guy from the Lions who got released for domestic violence situation. So but I think that is good that the league has the rules in place. I think that guys are going to have to learn how to deal differently with domestic situations because arguments can turn into more. And now, sometimes you're going to have to learn how to walk away. And sometimes if you know that you're a violent person, you're going to have to learn how to walk away. Just like you would walk away when it's an altercation with a male, because you don't fight every male that you confront. This I know. Men don't fight every male that they confront, but they're quicker to hit the woman.
Yeah, you pick your fights, definitely.
Right.
You don't want to make too much of a situation. There was a report that he and Davin Coleman, a teammate with the Cowboys, they got into a verbal altercation during off-season training program has started, and so during that part of that program, and then there was a report that he had driven his car. He's just going to have to be cognizant that, for better or for worse, he's going to be scrutinized right now, and so I have mixed emotions about the report about. I mean, you don't want media hiding things, right? I mean, but on the other hand, you don't want to make too much, and guys get into fights and can't. I mean,
right, all the time. All the time. So that's not even a big issue to me.
No,
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. Was the timing bad? I almost wonder whether, I don't know, I wonder whether this came out, or whether there's some buyer's remorse going on there, if Jerry's trying to maneuver himself into it. I don't know. I'm always a little bit cynical about something.
Well, they had his contract structured as, we don't lose anything, so, so they're okay. They should be okay. They expected a suspension. I wanted us to pick him. I wanted us to get him because I thought he was a good player. He would be a good asset to the team on the field. I don't get caught up too much in off the field stuff, but on the field, he was a good pickup. As long as they structured the contract so that we don't lose money, because we knew he was getting suspended. As he should have. So.
What would you say to? Obviously there are female fans out there who feel completely opposite. Who are like, we don't want him. I didn't want him on the team. I mean, how do you respond to that?
I told you I was one. I remember being on the show, and they asked me if there was one free agent that I wanted my team to pick. Greg Hardy was my answer because that's the free agent I wanted us to pick. Because he's a good football player. He's in his prime, and we need a defensive lineman. Personally, I wouldn't have a problem if we got Ray Rice. We need a running back. He could come cheap. He's a good running back. We have a good offensive line. The guy made a mistake. He's paying the price for it. You got to give people a second chance in life. Because everybody that's walking around, and that's including us, we've done some things in our life. And we can't walk around and act like we are Jesus, because there's only one perfect person. They're going to make mistakes. You got to give them another chance to do what's right or what's not. People make mistakes. I try not to, put too much on what everybody does off the field, because everybody that's on the football field are not great people. We like them because they play sports and what they can do for the team on the field. And so that's what I put my focus on, unless they do something awfully bad. If it's something like Sandusky and what happened at Penn State, well, it's hard for me to get away around that. But,
Well, I think that we're going to run out of time. We're not going to be able to. Again, and it goes back to where do you draw the line? Abusing kids, universally bad. Everybody, kind of accepts that. We don't like people who abuse kids. We didn't talk about Adrian Peterson. That's another, situation out there. Why do we agree that it's wrong to abuse kids? We don't want those guys on our team, but it's okay to abuse women, and we don't have a problem with that. That's the problem.
And I'm not saying that it's okay to abuse women. What I'm saying is a woman and a man is two adults. Somebody that abuses a kid would probably get arrested and be in jail, so they wouldn't be on the team anyway. They're not gonna get. They're not gonna get any. You know what I'm saying? The law states so. The law is gonna put them away for a different time. I'm just going by the law. Like I said, with the law for abusing a woman is not the same for the law for abusing a child.
Well, I think too. Of course, you see it there as well with how victims get treated. A lot of times, especially when you're dealing with younger kids and trying to get their story out. How we look at victims is very, very, very important. Much more to talk about that at a later time. Let's talk some sports. So the draft is coming up. Obviously, the Cowboys have some draft needs. What do you think that they need to look at? And will they or will they not finally look at a successor to Tony Romo?
Well, the Romo question, I've been asking myself that for the last 5 years, so I'm just going to skip over that because I have no faith that we're going to do that. Our needs are still as they were last year. We need defense. Our defense is nowhere near the defense that we need if we want to contend for a Super Bowl. Yes, I know we need running backs. Well, there are plenty of running backs in this draft. I'm sure we'll get one of them. But our focus needs to be defense. We didn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback last year. We're still weak in the defensive line. We got some youngsters that we picked up last year, but we lost Anthony Spencer. We lost a few more of our we lost George Selvey. Those are our veteran defensive linemen that we had. Mm-hmm. We let the other guy go that we picked up from the Bears last year. So we need defensive linemen. And I think that's where we need to start. And once we defensive linemen and cornerbacks, safeties, that's where our focus needs to be. I think we're content in the linebacker area. That's our strongest part on defense. But up front and in the back, we're struggling. And we're going to have to, it would be so nice if we could get Vic Beasley, but I know he'll be gone when we get there. But hopefully we can get get a couple of defensive linemen and defensive backs, safety in our regimen, and then, try to get one of these running backs. There are a few out there.
It's been a while since they took a defensive player in the first round. The last 2 years, hasn't it been? It's been an offensive lineman, right? I know
those were great picks. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. They really the offensive, and kudos to Jerry Jones for letting people help him. Their drafts have gotten significantly better. I've loved what they've done building that line. So you think it could possibly be a defensive player finally this year?
It has to be a defensive player. It has to be a defensive player. The defensive line has to get better in order for us to contend. Yes, the defense seemed to be better last year, but it was very deceiving. They were better because they were on the field less. The offense controlled the ball. The offense controlled the ball. They stayed on the field longer. And that gave the defense.
Stayed on the field.
The offense as a whole, yeah, and DeMarco Murray had a lot to do with that. And I like to argue with people and say, well, he only produced 1 year. Well, really, this was the only year we actually gave him an opportunity because we wouldn't run the ball beforehand.
And then to that, absolutely.
Yeah, and we wouldn't run the ball, but then again, he was hurt too, so he never played a full season until last year. But last year we committed to running the ball, and so that made a difference. But you could see even in the other seasons that if he was given the opportunity and if he stayed healthy, that he would be able to have a good season. Mm-hmm. But we still needed that offensive line wasn't as good his first 3 years. Yeah. So last year the offensive line was much better. Tony Romo, that helped Tony Romo stay in a lot more control because he didn't have to do everything. He didn't have as much pressure. Before we asked the man to do everything, he had to be everything for us. And so that puts a lot of pressure on him, especially when our players were changing in and out. We had different receivers. He was playing with people off the street. So I just think the offense, they probably need a receiver, another receiver, but someone they can get in the later rounds. What I want them to do is focus on the defense. If they can focus on the defense and get a backup quarterback. I mean, we've had a couple in draft that I think they could have kept. A guy that we had last year, but they let him go. I don't know what it is. Jerry Jones he likes to get these older veterans who weren't very good on their teams beforehand, and then he'll get them to be our backup. And so, I don't know what we're going to do.
Run DMC? Not a fan of the Run DMC, Simon?
I haven't seen. Tony Romo was the best backup we've had. Think about that.
Yeah.
Tony Romo was Drew Bledsoe's backup in 2006. That's the best backup we've had.
It's crazy. You can never discount Jerry Jones though for throwing a wrench into things to amping things up. I'm excited to see how the draft goes this year. So I know it's a little early. We don't know how the draft's going to go down. Training camp still to be held around the corner, basically. But still, what are the expectations for the Dallas Cowboys in 2015?
Well, I always tell people my expectation is for us to be the Super Bowl. That's always my expectation. And so when we don't do that, then we fail. And when you are a franchise that's when you won a Super Bowl, then that's what you expect. That's what you want every time. And of course, we've won 5 Super Bowls, and we've been to 8 Super Bowls. So that's pretty much what your expectations are. Is that you want them to get to the Super Bowl. Last year we were able to win the division, and we were able to play in we lost the playoff game. But we got to get at least to the NFC Championship game for me to feel halfway decent. But, of course, if I get all the way to the NFC Championship game, well, then you better win that game. You got to get the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? And then one thing about the NFC East, though, is that there's been a different champion every year. I always point this out. This is why I knew Philadelphia wasn't going to win last year. Every year there's a different champion in the NFC East. So it's going to be hard for us to repeat.
Yeah, the Cowboys have had a lot of success, but not here lately.
Yeah, it's always, but we're always in it. We won it last year, but every year that we were 8-8, all we had to do is win our last game. We would have won the division every single one of those years. And we lost.
But part of that is the division's weak. Come on.
I won't say that division is weak. I think that the division is. I won't say you guys think it's weak. I think it's a great division. I think a division that's competitive. I think a division that's competitive every year is a strong division. I think a weak division is the AFC East, where New England wins every year and nobody else has a chance. That's a weak division because we already know who the champion is. Nobody else has a chance. The same team wins every year.
I would disagree. I don't think the AFC East is. I think because the Bills. I mean, look, the Bills are right in there. The Bills are the Cowboys. They're right in there. They don't get enough respect. Miami Dolphins. They're right. Listen.
So what team has won the AFC East? How many years have New England won the AFC East? And how many times has it even been close? Like we know that they won in Week 10.
Well, I don't disagree with that. They've definitely New England's definitely been the cream of the crop in that division. But I think that there's still far more parity than. I think it's going to be. I'm excited to see what happens in both divisions. Really.
In our division, we have Super Bowl champions. All but one team in our division has won a Super Bowl, but they all have been to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So every single team has been to the Super Bowl, and even when the Giants won in the weak division, as everybody calls it, when they were 9-7, because they're in the weak division, but they won the Super Bowl. They beat those same New England Patriots, who was the best team in the AFC. Because I can look at the AFC and see some. To me, when you have Denver, they just flat out beat everybody. You know who's going to be the champion every year. It's going to be them. It's going to be New England. Well, now the Pittsburgh that division is strong. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. There's always a fight to the end. Strong division.
Have you had a chance to sit down and look at the schedule and analyze the schedule?
I did. I wrote my article on the schedule. We opened up with two games. This is tough because we opened up with 2 straight NFC East division games. We played the Giants and then we played the Eagles. So just think about what I just said about our division. There's been a different champion every year. The division has come down to the last game of the season. We open up with 2 games right off the front. So you can win both of them, you're in great position in our division. But if you lose 1 or 2 of them, you might be in trouble.
Yeah,
because
So give me your season prediction. How many games are they going to win? How many are they going to lose?
Let me see. We were 12-4 last year. I'm going to say we're going to go 11-5 this year.
All right. 11-5. You're going to take the
11-5 this year. We all, we play Seattle, we play New England. Ooh, we got a tough schedule, but I think we always have a tough schedule. We play Green Bay. That's our non-conference. Green Bay, Seattle, New England.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough schedule there. 11-5. You heard it here. Michelle predicting the Cowboys. They're going to take the division. Who are they going to be facing in the NFC Championship game?
We're going to play it. We're going to so we go to, let me see, we're going to win the division. We're going to make it to the NFC Championship game, and we're going to have a rematch of our playoff game. We're going to play the Green Bay Packers, and this time it won't come down to a fake catch.
Yeah, I think I completely. Listen, if the Cowboys do as well as you think they can do, and I don't disagree. I think that they've certainly got the talent level, and again, depending on injuries and draft and what have you, I do agree that. To me, I think that the Green Bay Packers should be I know that Seattle is the team that made the Super Bowl last year, back-to-back seasons for them. But I think it's the Green Bay Packers' year. I think that they should be the best team, one of the best teams in the NFC, and I think the team probably to beat because I just, it's early, but I don't know. I don't know if Seattle can hit that triple. I don't know if they can do it another year. I just don't.
It's going to be tough. The NFC is tough, boy. I mean, there's so many teams. There are so many of them that can possibly be there. But I'm going to, I love Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to hold it out to see that we can play Green Bay. We play them near the end of the season, too.
All right, Michelle. Thanks again for joining me. Tell everybody out there again where they can find you. You mentioned your article. Give a big plug to some of your latest work as well.
All right. Well, you guys can find me if you want to see what I say about the Dallas Cowboys. You can find me on NFLfemale.com. I am the official fan reporter for the Dallas Cowboys. Also, we'll be doing your weekly predictions once the football season starts. Check me out there and see if you can pick the games better than me. You can find me on Twitter at the Sports Jinks. That's JINKS. And also you can find me, if you wish, at the Sports Jinks on Facebook as well.
All right.
All right. Thanks again to Michelle Jinks for joining me this morning. We ran over. Apologies for that. Shout out again to Latoya Peterson for joining me in the second segment talking about writing. We talked some video games. She likes video games. I think I have a new girl crush, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Sharona Unfiltered. Again, no show on Wednesday. We will be back on Monday with another great episode. Robin Monday is going to join me as my special co-host. Have a very great Monday. Happy Monday. Have a great week, and we will be back on Monday with another great show.